Welcome to another episode of the LEX podcast. LEX, as you know, is Leaders in Employee Experience, and we bring in some of the global thought leaders to tell us what they have done in their careers and what advice they have for organizations in terms of employee experience and how organizations can use it as a strategic advantage. I'm privileged to have here today Hari Abburi. Many of you who are connected with us on LinkedIn would know all the work that Hari's been doing in the last few years. I wouldn't say last few decades, that will just make him sound much older than what he is. But just as a quick background, Hari is joining us today from Los Angeles in California. He is currently the Fast Forward exec. He currently runs the Fast Forward Executive and is the Future Skills Curator and faculty. Previously, he has worked in about 55 plus countries with organizations such as Horbager, Aon Hewitt, Walmart, Baxter, Coca-Cola, GE, and Anderson. Hari is a leading voice on agility for strategy, leadership, and organization. And he defines agility as being at the speed of the customer, which is great because a lot of things we do in employee experience are concepts we've borrowed from customer experience. So it will be a great journey with Hari today, talking about how the customer element can be an inspiration for employee experience and what we could do differently, specifically with a concept like agility, which everyone knows is in great demand today. So, Hari, welcome to the show. Very nice to have you on board here. Any opening thoughts before we proceed?
Nishit, firstly, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be connected with you. I really appreciate this conversation because as human experiences change with everything that we see, not just with technology, but even mindsets of people evolving very rapidly, agility, I think, is probably the most critical capability to build, not just into organizations, but also into the individual mindsets of leaders. And therefore, I think this conversation to me is really of interest and exciting.
Great. So we'll obviously delve deep into agility as a concept and its applications in the field of people management. But let's start with you. So tell our audiences more about who Hari is, where did he come from, what did he learn, and how did he land up here? I've seen obviously a lot of interesting phases in your career, from consulting to line HR to consulting, and now some cool stuff you're doing on your own.
Yeah, so my childhood has been in a city called Vizag in India, which is a beautiful seaside city. And both my parents were academicians, and we used to live in a university provided bungalow of sorts, or accommodation, or a house right in front of the beach, right? So we were 100 yards to the sea. So my childhood was very sea-centric. It was very palm trees and lots of coconut water and all of the good stuff, walks on the beach. So it was fantastic. So my education was in India. So I did my graduate in arts with majors in economics, and then went on to do my master's in human resources with Andhra University as well in Vizag. So as I came out of the college master's, I kept looking for, obviously in those days, the opportunity was very limited. India had not liberalized yet. So there were very few what we call as blue chip companies available. And I was lucky enough to start off my career with a company called ITW Signode. In those days, it was a fantastic organization. It continues to be. And when I joined the firm, the role that I joined for had already changed even before I joined. So they were undergoing massive transformation. They were shutting down manufacturing in a city called Hyderabad, moving it into a city called Silvassa in Gujarat. In those days, nobody had heard of it. There were no roads, there were no lights. So I was, primarily running the entire project of the relocation of manufacturing with the focus of closing out the units in Hyderabad. So So that kind of set the tone for rest of my career, where I think I got addicted to the adrenaline rush of complex, highly intense, right, high burn, high speed transformation of companies. And therefore, when they get over, you kind of get bored, I guess. So all of the assignments that I've done have all been at the intersection of strategy, leadership, transformation, something that is fundamentally that we're changing the organization for the next 10 years or 15 years to come. All right. So and all my roles have been very similar to that. I've been very lucky to have had the opportunity to work in Singapore and Malaysia before I lived in Zurich for many years, and really tested out you build philosophies as you build your career. So you get to test those philosophies as you go assignment to assignment, country to country, and you see some work, you see some don't work. That sharpens your perspective, but you still test out your philosophies, and that's the way I look at all transformations in companies.
That's very interesting. So from serene seaside upbringing all the way into the fast and furious world of business, that's quite a good journey as well, right?
Well, absolutely. No complaints at all. I think it's been a fabulous site. I haven't been back to Vizag in a while, but I do intend to make my pilgrimage sometime back there soon enough. But it's a wonderful place and it's been a great journey.
I was watching Vizag this morning in a cricket match between India and England that is happening
Yes.
in Vizag
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So,
I
so
started watching it last night. I don't know where the score is on day one, but I'll certainly catch up with it too.
it's quite a good even situation right now. The two
Okay.
countries that I kind of associate myself in are playing the match, so it's always good to kind of see how it goes. So tell us more about what you are currently doing in terms of the fast future kind of campaign. As I wouldn't call it a company, right? It's more a campaign than a company because
It's a
it's all
mission,
about.
actually. Yeah, it's a mission. So again, through years of experience, I've had the opportunity to meet a number of people who are really compelling thought leaders in different fields of their work. And the reason why that's important is I think at the heart of all change is the ability to build capability ahead of time. And companies that are able to do that are the smarter ones that win, have less disruption, have less angst among employees, have lesser loss of efficiencies in the process. So in all organizations, I had a chance to work with a set of thought leaders externally to bring home the point to the leaders internally on some of the perspectives of the world. So over a period of time, as I continued to build my consulting practice under the brand of the preparation company over the last 7-8 years, we have worked together with multiple companies building leadership capabilities in a highly customized, curated manner that fits their context of transformation or change. And
Right.
so what we did was, just a couple of years ago, we all banded together to form a consortium of global thought leaders called the Fast Future Executive.
Mhm.
Our purpose and our mission is to really build future-centric skills among leaders. And we call these leaders fast future executives because these are leaders who have a speed bias. They're able to connect seemingly disparate set of ideas, topics, or subjects and bring the future to their companies today. So there's an element of speed. There's an element of connecting disparate set of ideas and thoughts. And there's an element of applying it to today's context so that the company can accelerate. That's what we do. And we do it in multiple ways. We do it through curated custom executive education. We have a fantastic innovative online learning called the Fast Future Fundamentals. So, it's a consortium, as you mentioned. It's a mission to build fast future executives. We enjoy it because we are curating in real time, so there's nothing more terrible than learning outdated content in today's world. So when I look at some of the solutions around that companies use, I look at it and say, January 2023 is 1970 from a transformation standpoint. That's how fast the world moves, right? So we want to be, therefore, at the speed of the customer in the minds of the leaders. That's how I would connect all the dots.
Yeah, it so reminds me of what I reflect back as what I joke about my being my midlife crisis, which was 4 years ago, before which was basically the trigger for VSOR as an entity, and it was all about, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm doing what I read in my textbooks in my B school. What I read in the B school was written 30 to 70 years before I read it. So how has life changed? And I completely kind of connect with that thought that uh, 2023 is no different from 1970. And that's one thing I have also seen. When you look at how life has changed as a customer, life has changed substantially. So the way we consume movies, the way we buy our groceries, the way we book our travel, all of that is not 1970 anymore. But then within the organization, why do you think we are still stuck in the 70s?
I think partly, let's start with let's take the easier part out of the equation. There is incredible focus on confidentiality, security, data protection, GDPR, right? So we tend to lead design with what is a regulatory framework, what is essential for companies to keep. That's number one. Number two is we have hordes of IT people who have grown up in the networking, architecture, hardware era. I have still yet to, I've about just about the 10% of technology people that I meet are really customer application centric thinkers, right? So they describe how data moves between systems very easily, but they cannot describe how a consumer would like to click on an iPhone and the customer journey at all. So I think so the easier part is we've all grown up in an era where and compliance is very critical. So therefore we design with compliance first. There's nothing wrong with it, but you got to add layers to that in a sense, right? So therefore the easier one I say is there are two dimensions I'll give you. One is a fun dimension and one is a real one. Companies have to also manage the cost of assets.
Mhm.
So if you're buying hundreds and millions of laptops around the world, if you have hundreds of data card readers around the world giving you access to facilities, so all of this costs money. So therefore, what happens is you treat it like a CapEx item that needs to be managed, not like an experience item. So for example, in my life, when I open any of my devices, I don't know when I last logged in because my Apple Watch opens up all my devices.
Hmm.
When I open a screen on my laptop and I shift to my phone, the same screen is available on my phone as a handoff. When I add when I add an article to read on my reading list on my iPhone, I can open it up on my iPad or that level of productivity gain that I have. Imagine if I'm doing this for a living. I read for about 2 to 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours a day. So, right. So I'm constantly shuffling between devices based on where I am, what I'm doing. Imagine if I had to log in every single time, if I have to search for an article so there's a fundamental loss of productivity due to poor design,
Hmm.
uh, right? And access to tools, if you may. That's one. So the second part of it is actually a fun human psychology thing. I always tell people that employees leave their brains at the door when they walk in, right? So when you get an iPhone, you never asked for guidance. You don't have an IT help desk. You figure it out.
Yeah.
But guess what? Even if if your LAN wire is not connected to your laptop, you raise an IT ticket for service. You can't even check if your computer is connected properly to the network first. So there's this weird human psychology that when I come to work, I need babysitting, but when I'm at home, I'm like the geekiest, savviest tech dad showing off to my kids. So I can't figure that dichotomy of human psychology saying because it's company, you do it for me, but because it's me. So So I think so a lot of that psychology plays into the tools that we build and the experiences that we build for employees. So I think that in a nutshell is where I think the challenge lies.
No, all of us have been through that where we had to raise a ticket and the IT guys won't come to solve it unless we raise a ticket. If you became senior enough, someone would raise a ticket on your behalf, but there had to be a ticket for things to get resolved. And that kind of fascination with managing issues, I think it has also played a role in the way we don't look at experience. Right? So people love getting dashboards, but they don't necessarily have the patience or even sometimes the capability to understand the story behind that number. So that's an interesting thing. And since we've started off on the customer side and we're talking about agility, which is at the thought at the speed of the customer, what are some of the things we can now learn from how customers have been treated and start treating our number one customer, which is our employee, at least in some of the more progressive organizations? So some of the top headline practices or thinking that we can borrow and start applying to our internal customers.
Sure. I think let's start with the customer side first, right? So as you mentioned, I call agility at the speed of the customer. What it essentially means is not to build systems and infrastructures that are the Mount Rushmore that you cannot change them for 3,000 years, right? So in fact, I have fun internally when I work with companies, I label them because that is the easiest way to give feedback to people. So I ask them, are you building a Mount Rushmore? If the answer is yes, don't build it, right? So the way customer experiences are designed is that companies have found a way to be fairly adaptive, in terms of responding to customer needs. So let's step back and say, first, let's talk about the era of digital and the transition to AI in a sense, because that has a larger umbrella impact. While digital has made things easier for customers, it is still linear in the sense that you still have to go through step 1 to step 5. It's not intuitive, right? So if you ask any of your smart voice devices to do 2 actions at the same time, it cannot do it. You'll have to say, turn on the lights, right? Then turn on the TV and then lock the door. So there are 3 different commands that you have to give to the voice assistant to carry out those actions on your behalf. Is it smart? Yes. Is it digital? Yes. It is really high tech? Yes, it is, right? But is it human and intuitive? The answer is no. So what we have done, therefore, is this entire ticketing system as well is a product of the digital era. Great process because we can manage scale. If we get like 1 million tickets, we know, right, the queue, response time, resolution, right? We say, hey, 98% of our tickets were resolved within the first 2 hours. All of that sounds great. But when you put on the other side of the customer, it's been a frustrating experience because it's linear in a sense. You still have to go through 10 steps to accomplish that, right? Now, therefore we have done is that we have taken that digital linearity and applied it to every tool and system and process that we built for employees. And then you layer the complexity that HR people love. HR people are incredibly complex in the way they think. I have multiple theories for it, which I won't necessarily say. Part of it, I think, is fundamental job insecurity or the need to show that I'm adding value at every single transaction point, right? So the question I would ask is, if there was no HR in companies, would still people be able to apply for their annual vacation? The answer is yes. Therefore, the role of human resources has to really transition to away from this entire discussion on digital linearity, technology, etc., into some core experiences that you want to provide the employee. And therefore I say in the transition I do there is anything that touches an employee is a HR issue. And I've learned this, I worked with a company where we had large customer service call centers for our credit card business. When a customer, they had to toggle two different screens to respond back to the customer in that 5-minute call. And it was really difficult. The amount of training we had to do, the amount of, it's a high burnout rate when your tools are designed in a complex way, right? But guess what? No HR person wants to tackle it, even though it's a huge HR problem, because it is the head of customer service, head of technology who has to resolve it. So HR has to get into the sandbox of everything that employees touch, because that's where experience design sits, right? So, and that's a difficult transition to do.
And I was talking to someone from a customer experience background recently, and we had this very interesting discussion. And he says, how many journeys does an employee have over their life cycle? And he says, for me, the employee is your number one customer. So before you start designing customer experience, you have to fix employee experience. And he says that when I go and talk to companies, people say they have there's a candidate experience journey, then there's an onboarding journey, then there is a kind of performance journey, there's a learning journey, there is all kinds of things. And he says, I look at them and say, no, there's only one journey. The moment you have more than one journey, you are kind of missing the boat. So if we were to kind of look at that one journey that a person goes through from the time they click apply on a job site to the time that they exit. And I've seen this kind of play out in funny ways. I once was resigning from a large global bank, and I was told that all resignations have to be done online. So I said, okay, fine. And this was like long ago, before the HRMS became a little bit more capable. I don't believe they're still very capable, but this was prehistoric times. And I said, okay, fine, I'll resign online. And there were two things that occurred to me. One, I got an instant notification, which was great. But it says, in response to your online resignation dated stuff. And I said, okay, you could just have said in response to your resignation. And the funny thing was, my manager didn't know for 4 days that I had resigned, because obviously the mail was somewhere in the inbox, not opened. And I was like, for 4 days, I was thinking, what's happening? Why is no one speaking to me? Does someone even realize that I have resigned already? Till the
Oh,
time I had to go
absolutely.
across and say,
It,
listen, do we need to talk? I have resigned
it,
four
it's
days
it's a
ago.
it's a great example. It's a great example. I think I would describe this. I would actually give a 2-point answer to the journey question that you had. First is everything that we do to build experiences. Employee experience has to reduce the barrier between the employee and the customer. In the definition of agility that I have, there is only one customer who pays for your services. There is no, this internal customer thing is probably the most distracting, misleading misnomer that we have, right? So you're so busy serving internally that you can't figure out who the customer actually is. When Jack Welch took over GE, in the first officers meeting, he says, we've become a company with face to the boss and ass to the customer. That is a perfect definition of internal customers, right? So, and then this entire argument that, hey, my function actually doesn't have an external customer to serve. We get all of that, but employee experience is about helping employees get really close to the customer. So there is no noise, there's no loss of productivity, there's no barriers to the customer centricity that the company wants to adopt. That's one part of it. So experience is not really about the employee, but helping the employee enjoy serving the customer, right? So that is the experience part of it. I don't really care if an employee loves the office, if the lights look good, if the plants are well watered. Yeah, sure, all of that. But ultimately, you're creating an experience to serve the customer, right? That is employee experience.
Right.
That's one part of it. The second part about it is the design in terms of conversations in a company. I always say this, no technology must replace conversations at workplace. Because the moment you do that, you're replacing the most valuable thing, which is judgment of the company, the ability to listen, the ability to nurture, the ability to mold, guide, right? All of the human behaviors that are so essential for company to change. You cannot change companies by putting FAQs in a chatbot. Those have to be conversations. And when we design performance management systems, I mean, I won't name the brand, but this is one of the most premier HR technologies that is enterprise technologies that most companies have. When we started, they have this scoping document they come with, and they do a drama around design, all of that. But there's only so many ways you can peel this banana of performance management from a technology perspective, right? So they make it sound as if it's like a new spacecraft that is landing on the far side of the moon. But so when I finished the design with them, I had selected only 16 features out of their exhaustive list of 3,000 features on the system. Right? I'll give you a great example of that. One is when a manager has to give a reply to something that you put on the form, the manager has, no, I said, don't put it. Let the manager reach out to the employee. So the system does not have anything in design that replaces a conversation. It is a record keeping tool. It was never meant to take over the job of the supervisor, whether it's feedback, development, or anything else. So the minimalistic design that actually nurtures real human conversations is critical. So one, experiences are about bringing employees really close to serving the customer. Second is never replace human conversations in a company with technology, because that is not the purpose of technology, right? So between these two, I think the customer centricity, so we bring that external orientation back into where where we design jobs, the way we design organization models, structures, processes, tools, all of that. I'll give you one last thing. It's the same with training too. So when you design these experiences and when you implement all of this stuff internally in terms of in the name of digital transformation, there's a large enablement teams that we build. Sure, you need some of it, but if the design principle is that anything that is well designed does not need training, conversely, anything that is poorly designed needs training, then your approach to building experiences in company changes.
I was once talking to a veteran in the technology sales business, trying to learn the ropes, I think almost 3.5, 4 years ago. And I was telling him the application we are building is so intuitive. We are building it with a zero training manual philosophy. And he looked at me and he smiled and said, "That's a great thought. By the way, when I used to sell software not so long ago, I used to have a separate line target on training. So when I would sell software, that there was a kind of fee for the software, but I had also a budget to meet on training cost, because I had to get them into a training program, because otherwise I would miss the target. So maybe some of the design is complex, possibly by intent, so that you have to invest in training. And when you get used to that particular way of working, you don't want to go out, because you've invested so much of your effort trying to learn that. When I kind of first started banking in the UK, I got this kind of plastic device in which I had to insert my card and like 6 buttons to press and stuff. And I was saying, why can't they send me an OTP? Why can't they display the same access code on my mobile app? And then I figured out that, you know what, I don't even get an SMS for a swipe I do on my card, because the systems are so old that no one had these features when this system came up, maybe in the 90s or something, and they can't do it. So in a lot of these cases, sometimes complexity may be by design, because you want to lock the user in. The engineer that you spoke about, the software engineer who's been trained in that way, would find themselves out of job if all enterprise software became so intuitive that they would not be required to play a role.
But the jobs at that company are not my responsibility. My employees are my responsibility. So The way I would describe this entire complexity debate is complexity equals cost, simplicity equals margin. So there is no rationale whatsoever for any company to be building complexity in the name of, uh, whatever habits you want to build, because you're adding to SGA, as simple as that. I can empirically go industry to industry, company to company, and say, do you have a complex process? I can tell you how much cost it's adding. Are you going to simplify it? I'm going to show you how much margin you're going to. So complexity is cost, simplicity is margin. There's a Siegel and Gale is a very well-known brand consulting company out of New York. I've had the opportunity to interact with their former CMO multiple times. They have something called a brand simplicity index.
Mhm.
So uh, the top brands that are simple in the minds of the consumers or the customers command a 30% price premium. So customers are paying more for that simplicity. Example, Starbucks,
Mm.
right? Uh, uh, Conversely, the bottom, whatever number of uh, companies that are absolutely poor on simplicity are car rental companies, insurance companies, a couple of banks, and guess what? LinkedIn, right? So you see there that simpler the brand proposition, the more the consumers are willing to pay. But they've also done further research on how it applies internally to companies. They have found greater employee advocacy of the brand when their work environment is simpler,
Mhm.
right? So, and they go on to describe the elements of simplicity that they've applied internally as well in terms of measurement. So, complexity is the natural state of humans. So is mediocrity. Both are not very different. Simplicity is a choice that you have to make as a leader. It takes deep personal courage
Mm.
and outstanding design thinking and skills for the brilliance to be working, right? So and I obviously complexity I have a very strong allergic reaction to. You can feel it already, but complexity is cost, simplicity is margin.
True. And it kind of also resonates because for us, simplicity is one of our core values. So we have this internal truth that we always want to live by, which is simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It is very easy to make a complex product. It is quite easy actually, but to make it simpler is something which takes a lot of effort and is painstakingly difficult. So there was a time when in my corporate career we were working on the new set of values, new set of core values for the organization, and I told my teammates we are not going to build a competency dictionary around it. Let's get a one pager. And we were lucky to have just four values. So the executive team agreed that anything more than four would be an absolute non-starter. We actually started with three and then added a fourth one. And we said there are only four stages in this company in terms of seniority or career. So four stages as four columns, four values as four rows. Said let's make a 4x4 grid. That's it. It took us 2.5 months to get that right. We could have churned out a competency dictionary with our collective consulting backgrounds in 5 days maximum.
Yeah.
And that's where is the realization that it's very difficult to simplify things. And we're consciously trying to do that in the product that we are building, because most of the software out there is complex, right? So we are kind of fully aligned in that sense that it takes effort to simplify things.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Just another quick example on the competency framework. In this company that I worked, we were really global. We were trying to bring it together into a singular environment across a certain staff levels of the company, right? We took competency model away in a certain year, and we did not tell anyone. Nobody noticed it, not even HR people, right?
yeah.
So there are lots of what I call as legacy built into the company that nobody knows who owns that legacy, where it comes from. partly it's fear of doing it away. So because you don't know who's going to react to it. And part of it is, hey, it's not in my wheelhouse, so why should I care about? So if we go around and ask employees around the world in any company, what would you like to get rid of, and make a list of things, I would bet that a lot of it is legacy. You'll never know who owns it, where it belongs, why it started in first place.
Yeah.
Financial reports is one great example. The number of reports we churn, we burn finance people out, but nobody reads all of them, right? So there's a level of redundancy built into companies in the name of, however we do it. And that also impacts employees in terms of experience.
Yeah. I want to go back to a previous discussion we were having, like literally 5 minutes ago, on not using technology to replace conversations. Yeah. And that's a very important thing. But the rate at which technology is creeping into our workplace and our personal lives as well, right? So you walk into a restaurant and you see four people sitting on a table, and all four would be on their phone. That could be my family also. So I'm not saying about anyone else, but we've changed as a species, right? So we are more into our devices. The kids have more virtual friends than real friends, and things are only going to, in my old fashioned view, go worse, right? Whether good or worse, I will figure out later when I'm in my grave, but for now I believe it's for worse and not for the good. And the same kind of change is also being seen at the workplace with the kind of gradual creep of technology over everything that we do. And in that sense, where do you see experience as a concept? Because when we talk about experience, we define it as a combination of culture, process, and technology. And we'd be the first ones to go and say, just by changing technology, nothing's going to change. You need to change technology. You need to first change your process, then change your technology. And eventually, if you don't change the culture, forget it. No point doing anything, because you're not going to get any benefits from this process. But what is your view overall in terms of how technology is going to come and evolve and change the way people live and work, and what kind of an impact it would have on experience?
See, let's start with the conversations part. So obviously for the last 10 years, we've had almost a failed revolution of chatbots. The world is cluttered with chatbots that really annoy people. And I usually never quote companies, but I have to in this example, Virgin Atlantic Airways. You book a ticket on Virgin Atlantic Airways, it's like Mount Rushmore. To change it, the only way you can change a ticket is to call a call center that is understaffed. So 100% of the time, you'll never speak to somebody after 1 hour on the line. You get frustrated and disconnect. And what is interesting is when you try to change it online, it says, click on the help button at the bottom. It'll ask you all questions, wait for an agent. And the agent says, we are too busy, please try again, right? On the chatbot. And then finally, when you get through, on one rare occasion, which I did, to change a ticket, I had to go through multiple loops. And then he puts a link, or she puts a link in there saying, please click on this. It took me to a completely different payment gateway that was not even branded Virgin Atlantic, and I almost thought it was a fraud. And I paid on it. And then I came back and say, I paid it. And he said, please wait. Then after 5 minutes, say, okay, we are verified. Imagine that their payment system is not even integrated into the ticketing system, and the ticketing system can't even change. So we have seen over the last 10 years experiments with chatbots that supposedly were supposed to be really great at helping me do my stuff, right?
Yeah.
From a design perspective, the closest I think in terms of brilliance of intuitive bot-based consumer experience is an app called Lemonade in the US. It's a new insurance company. It's an app on insurance company. They have done a brilliant job of the intuitiveness in terms of how it interacts with you. They've really mastered that, right? But to do that, I think you need a level of sophistication in a company to think it through. So my argument for conversations is, don't complain so much about technology taking away or distracting people. Spend the same time in designing things that you want people to be engaged with. So why are you complaining about people being on social media? Because there's nothing else that we can figure out that is smarter and engaging and addictive than social media, right? So
Mm.
let's really try and focus, and I'm talking within the context of a company, right? So focus your employees onto something that is really of high interest, high engagement, high value. A 500-word letter from the desk of the CEO is the stupidest concept in the modern world today because it's just another message. It's great for investor community to analyze each word. Yeah, okay. I work for a company, I get my paycheck, I have the same boss every day I struggle with. Thank you, CEO, for your wonderful message of, flowers and roses that you sent across on email. I appreciate it a lot. So therefore, I think the transition, so don't try to replace technology. So try and build a next level of conversation in the company that is of some meaning to the employee, right? And that is also true of customers, by the way. So the customer is looking for multiple experiences from a brand. Uh, so the bot is one aspect of it. The website is one aspect of it. The way a product works when I actually get it is one aspect of it, right? So therefore, the ability to have these multi-tiered experiences is so critical for your brand to be rounded off, and that is no different than an employee. So I think we need to find other things to engage employees with. Uh, because technology will replace what it has to replace anyway. That's a given.
Yeah, yeah. And value is what we got in loads from this conversation. So before we kind of wind up, any closing thoughts, Hari, on which way organizations should look at, some things that they should be aware of, pitfalls before they embark on this change of experiences in agility?
I would actually uh, close up by saying that agility is really not about adapting immediately in real time or pivoting. That is a reaction. Agility is a extremely well thought through, calculated opportunity game where you're actually understanding the opportunity landscape of tomorrow and bringing it to your company today. That is true of experiences, that is true of culture, that is true of processes, that is true of technology. Just surviving the game is resilience. So a cheetah running after its prey is not agility. It is just resilience and physical ability, right? So agility is spotting the next big opportunity and bringing it. I think the opportunity that AI offers is something that companies must experiment very quickly to learn. Just because you want to wait and see how it goes out, etc., is not an answer. So I would define agility as being at the speed of the customer, but then for that to happen, you got to selectively go after opportunities that you think are coming down the horizon, but you got to do it today in an experimental fashion. And I would urge all experience design managers to constantly experiment with experiences because there is no one big magic wand solution to it.
Fantastic. This was wonderful. Hari, thank you so much for your time. We will give your contact details on our social handles when the podcast is out, so that the listeners can get back in touch with you if they want any further detailed discussion. But thank you so much. It was wonderful having you here on the episode today.
Thank you for having me, Nishit. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.